We are on Exodus 13. So some people would say we're getting to the good stuff. We're getting to where we're going to have the crossing of the Red Sea. Now my thing's getting all screwy here. And that's pretty cool stuff, no matter how you slice it. I'm having technical issues. Oh, well, so what? Okay, so the Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both of man and beast, is mine. I want to talk just about flow first. We just left where it said, and on that very day, the Lord brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their hosts. And now we have this. The Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me all the firstborn. Remember, the editor, the author here, is not worrying about everything being a travel log. This is not a travel log. So there will be things put in here that the Lord, this is what the Lord said to Moses. When had he said this to Moses? If you're just looking at this as a travel log, it's like they just pulled out on the freeway of their times, and he gets a cell phone call, and the Lord's telling him this, you know. I don't think so. I think that this is something that the Lord had said to him, and we just need to keep in mind what the intent of the author is. Moses wants us to know these things as they relate to the significance of what is going on. And that is more important than the exact moment in time when the Lord said this to Moses. Because if you just read it, the Lord said to Moses, well, when did he say it? There is no point on the timeline that's given. It's just that he said it. Okay. Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the people of Israel, both man and beast, is mine. This is going to be repeated, reiterated, emphasized in different ways. It's talked about as something of significance that is to be passed down from generation to generation. And I want to talk for just a moment about what these ceremonial things were about. And there's a lot of different ways ceremonial rituals can be used. First and foremost, all of the ceremonial stuff in the Old Testament, taken individually, very often it's just obviously clear, but also collectively, all of this stuff pointed ahead to Jesus. It points ahead to Jesus. If you take, like draw out on a piece of paper in front of you, like draw a picture of the big book and have Old Testament, 39 books, New Testament, 27 books, all 39 books of the Old Testament are pointing ahead to Jesus. All of the stuff surrounding the worship at the temple, the design of the temple, the ceremonies that went on in the temple, things that went on among the people about worship, etc. It all pointed ahead to the Savior, okay? It also, in this case, points back. It points back to the mighty work of salvation that God had done. The firstborn of Israel and those who connected themselves with Israel, which is to connect yourself with the people of God, which is to connect yourself with salvation. It is to be connected with salvation. That was brought about by God sparing the firstborn of Israel and killing the firstborn of all living things in Egypt. So by having them consecrate to the Lord the firstborn, it was a reminder to them. It was a reminder that God saved them by mighty works, by an incredible work. And it also pointed ahead to the salvation that was the greatest of all mighty works that was to come. And we talked in our Wednesday, Wednesday night study on Matthew about Jesus fulfilling all righteousness, right? When he goes to get baptized by John the Baptist, John said, whoa, it is I who need to be baptized by you, but you're coming to me. And Jesus said, permit it to be so, for thus it is fitting to fulfill all righteousness. Okay. When Jesus was born and they went to the temple, went from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, about 8 miles, they went to present him to the Lord. He was circumcised. What did they do? They consecrated him to the Lord. They consecrated him to the Lord. For poor people, for wealthy people, it was a lamb or a goat. For poor people like Joseph and Mary, it was 2 turtle doves. They consecrated him to the Lord. The firstborn was set apart. And it's also a reminder that Israel is God's firstborn. He's their child. You're my firstborn, and I spared you. I killed Ra's firstborn, Horus Incarnate's firstborn. Okay. So all of this stuff, when we see all of this stuff about ceremony and things in the temple and all of that, don't just go blah, 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 this is boring stuff. Think about it in the light of salvation, the plan, the working of salvation. And salvation, it can be understood as we look at it in the scriptures, as it is revealed to us. God had it all known. It was all known to God in eternity. But before the worlds came to be, God knew what he was going to do to save man when they sinned. And things get really challenging for us there, because we're talking about the prescience of God and what he knows and how that interacts with us and free will and blah, blah. Yeah, you can just go on forever and go down. I just mentioned 3 different rabbit holes we could go down, and I could bring up 2 more that I don't even want to bring up. Big point. God always knew what he was going to do. He always did. He reveals it to us progressively. More and more and more things were revealed to us humans, to the children of Israel. And you can think of that as a tapestry being woven. That if you think of, how one of those tapestries that has different pictures in it, and the weaver is doing their work on the loom, and slowly you can tell it's something, but you don't know what it is. And you can say, oh, I think that's going to be a person. And oh, there's an animal there. And oh, some flowers, it looks like. It's appearing more and more as they work higher and higher up on the tapestry. That's a good way to think about God revealing to us what happens, what the plan of salvation was, what was going to take place. Okay? Long tangent, but I think that's all important stuff. One more thing I'll say. I practiced what I preached just now. I practiced it this week. I was sitting and listening to 1 Kings. And I was listening, or 2 Kings, can't remember which now. I was listening to where it talks about Solomon building the temple. And most of you have been in our house. As I sit in my chair, that we've still got the picture of Jonathan from his going home service, that sign for by the door, so people knew where to go. And so it's kind of like John is sitting there and looking at me, looking dapper with his new haircut and his sunglasses. And he's sitting there and looking at me, and I'm listening to the description of the temple that Solomon built. And that temple, when you listen to the description of the temple, and you can do the same thing with the tabernacle in Leviticus, when you listen to the description of the temple, it's got what? It's got trees, and it's all overlaid with gold. and all I could think of, as I said there, the reason I talked about Jonathan, is that earthly manifestation that's described there of God's place where he dwells with man. Jonathan is now there. And to make it tangible how awesome it is to us in this world, Solomon was so rich, he overlaid everything with gold. The whole place inside was covered with gold. I can't even imagine what that had to look like. Staggering. And all I could think of is Jonathan is at the real dwelling place of God with man, and how awesome that is. And I was thinking about the conversations Jonathan could have with Solomon. Finally, somebody who Jonathan knows is smarter than him. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived. And if you don't know, God made Solomon the wisest man who would ever live, because when God appeared to Solomon after David, the great King David had died, his father, and there was political wrangling, who was going to become king. But it was Solomon. It was always supposed to be Solomon. David had promised Bathsheba that it would be Solomon. And the Lord appears to Solomon and he says, "What can I give you?" And Solomon said, "I'm but a youth. Who am I? Who am I to govern the people of God, to govern your great people? Don't give me wealth and honor and all that stuff. Give me wisdom. Give me wisdom so that I can judge justly and rule the way I should." And God said, "Yeah, I'll make you wise. You're going to be the wisest man who ever has lived and ever will live. And because you didn't ask for it, I'm also going to give you wealth beyond imagination." And then later it describes the wealth that was brought to him. But big part of what he did with that wealth was he built the house of God. David had been told, "No, you're a man of war. You're not building the house of God, my house. Your son will." And Solomon did that. Enough of that tangent. It all fits in, but it is comforting, especially for those who didn't hear it. We will put it on the Sunday Bible. Aaron, my son Aaron, had reached out to Switchfoot. He and John went to 2 Switchfoot concerts, and both times did the backstage thing where they got to meet with the band, and Aaron's got pictures of them together with the band. And the first concert that they went to, the last song they played, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's talking about, I'm not sentimental. This skin and bones is just a rental. I'm looking for a place where I belong. And Aaron reached out to them. They're doing virtual concerts. And Aaron reached out to him and asked him if they when they did the concert, dedicate that song to John. And he went on last night. They were in the process of moving, but he went on and boom, it was right where they were introducing that song, and Aaron recorded it, did a screen recording. And it came out pretty good, Aaron, on his phone, I guess. But we'll put that on the Family Bible link so you guys can see it. While we continue to grieve and deal with life here without him, it is so awesome, and it is the balm of healing for our souls to think about where he is and where we are going. That toward the end of that song, it says, "No one gets out alive." Of this world, no one gets out alive, as we think of life in this world. And I thought about that as a way to give us perspective, a lens through which we can look at this world. And sometimes when you hear something phrased differently than you had thought of it or had heard before, it just makes you think about things you already know, but think about them differently. And this is where we go wrong. We don't think day to day when you get up and log in to go to the office or go out to do your shopping, what else? None of us stops and thinks on a regular basis. I'll speak for myself. I don't stop and think on a regular basis. I'm in a war. I'm in a war. The powers of darkness, the lords of hell, are working in this world and all their minions with them to crush the light of truth. To crush the light of truth. They're trying to keep it from being spread. They're trying to keep it from being preached. And they want to undo us. They want to separate us from the shepherd. They are wolves and lions and bears. Oh my. And they want to separate us from the shepherd. That's what's going on. And it's going on when I go to Walmart to buy lactose-free milk. It's going on when I go wherever, when I go to work, that's always going on. It's a war, and I'm not getting out of it alive here. This world is not my home. It's not what it's about. I wasn't put here to build some kind of kingdom of comfort in this world. I'm not. I am to focus on sharing the word, spreading the light. And if you wonder why evil progresses, if you wonder why the world gets perpetually more evil and why it is happening at an exponential rate, and for the old among us, relatively old, I can think back to living in Mulberry, Indiana in 1966. And if you want to know what Mulberry, Indiana was like in 1966, turn on the Andy Griffith Show. And Mayberry RFD, Mulberry, Indiana was about as close to Mayberry RFD as you can get. Now, there was all kinds of stuff going on in the world. There was the Vietnam War, there was the hippie things and protests and all of that. And don't you wonder what the hippies would think about the politically correct movement? It's just funny how evil will turn things however it wants to make it work to suit and serve its purposes. But why has the world changed so much from 1966, when I was 4 years old, 67 when I was 5 years old, to today? It's not that the darkness is getting stronger. Darkness isn't anything. It is a lack. It is a deprivation. There is no light, and so the dark advances. Think of I've got one of those, whatever it is, 600 lumen hand lights. I go out to take the dogs out at night, and I shine it around, look at the trees, look out in the woods, see if I can see any critters. As that battery gets weaker, the light gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. The preaching of the gospel is what is on the decline, and therefore the darkness advances. The preaching of the gospel is the chain with which Satan is bound. You want to stop Satan? Preach the gospel. If Martin Luther said, if you want to chase Satan away, sing a hymn of praise to God. He can't stand the sound and he'll run away. Literally like a coward. I can't stand to hear it. Praise God, Satan runs. Okay? That's the chain that binds him. That is the little word that in a mighty fortress is our God, Martin Luther says, can fell him. One little word, Jesus, praise Jesus, he runs. Okay? It's because that proclamation of the word is decreasing. And these big mega churches that exist that are really, what are they preaching? I don't know. Oftentimes it's not the truth of the word. And all the stuff going on in the world today, whether it's the transgender stuff, whatever sick, perverted, wacko craziness you want to pick, who speaks out against it? Who's doing it? I don't know. I don't see them. I don't hear it. If you do, you're crushed. And what we have to understand is that with all of this hate speech, they went from political correctness, and now they call it hate speech. And what they have defined as hate speech is the word of God. The whole church is asleep to the fact that it has been outlawed. And in how many ever years into the future, not that many, when anyone who speaks out will be incarcerated, will be punished, will have their wealth taken away, will not be able to use the electronic currency that they insist on. Everybody will be going, wow, how did this happen? How did this happen? Well, it happened because we let the light fade and the darkness advance. We let them define the word of truth, the word of salvation, as hate speech. Hate speech. Anyway, no, I've really gone on a tangent, but I think it's all important stuff. It is perspective as we talk here about God redeeming us, as we talk here about his church, because that's what the children of Israel were. They were his church. It was making into a nation at the time, but his church is his firstborn. Who are we? How dear are we to him? We are his firstborn. And when we see his mighty works and his mighty acts of salvation, then we are motivated all the more to proclaim that truth, whatever may come. Then Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand. Who's got the strong hand? In his title, Pharaoh had the term, the strong hand of Ra. No. That strong hand just got smacked aside. For by a strong hand, the Lord brought you out from this place. No leavened bread shall be eaten. Today in the month of Abib, which was about March, April, and it was now the first month of the year, new calendar, big significant thing. It all revolves around this going forward. You are going out. And when the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, he's not just saying, yeah, this is this old stuff God's always been saying. No, God is keeping his promise. The promise he made to Abraham, the promise he made to Isaac, the promise he made to Jacob when Jacob left, and he reassured him, your kin is going to come back. I will bring them back. And all those nations, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, they were scary people. That's where the giants are. It's like in the pirate movies, Pirates of the Caribbean, whatever, where at the edge of the map, that's where there be monsters. The giants were there. But he swore to your fathers to give it a land flowing with milk and honey, prosperity, blessedness. You shall keep his service in this month. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a feast to the Lord. Why unleavened bread? Because when you're hitting the road and you're in a hurry, you take unleavened bread. You have dough that isn't leavened, that lasts longer. The bread you make lasts longer, but it has to do with the haste with which they went out of Egypt. God said, go. A lot of you helped us move into this house we're in here now back in January. All kinds of work goes into it. If you got to go now, you have to leave. When? Now. Go. Well, you're not grabbing everything out of the fridge and throwing it into a cooler with a bunch of ice because you didn't even have time to go buy ice and you can't remember where the cooler is. Go. That's what they were doing. Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen within you, and no leaven shall be seen within you in all your territory. Again, if you want to remind me of something, give me a picture. Pictures make us think of things. Don't have any of that. It makes you remember. With haste, God brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall tell your son on that day. Tell your kids. Tell your kids. Tell your kids. You know what the secret of parenting is? Here it is. Are you ready? Besides loving them. Everybody knows that part. You know what the secret of parenting is? Talk with your kids. Tell them stuff. Explain stuff to them. Help them think about things. That's how you do it. You talk with them. You interact with them. You tell them, well, and you get them to think, why do you think Bobby at school is so mean? Well, and the parents should ask, well, do you think Bobby has a home where he feels loved by both his parents? Are both his parents there? Is his mom or dad able to even spend any time with him? But Get the kids to think rather than just telling them stuff. Teach them things. And that's what God is saying to do here. And in the verse where he talks about how to raise kids most clearly, Deuteronomy 6:4, he says, talk with them. Teach them these things and talk to them while you're on the way and while you sit down and when you lie down to go to bed at night. Talk with them. Don't lecture. Have conversations. Let them tell you what they think, and then instruct them, teach them, get them to think. Again, always sounds crass, but it's what my dad taught me, and it's very true. Few people are stupid. Most people choose not to think. Don't be one of them. Think. Timothy Leary did get that part right. He actually got the whole thing right. Think for yourself and question authority. Timothy Leary is the guy who promoted LSD. But what he said can be understood in the right way. Think for yourself. Question authority. Rely on the real authority is the most important thing. You shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall be to you as a sign on your hand and a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. If you've got something written on your hand, if you're wearing a headband with something hanging between your eyes from it, a frontlet, as they would call it, you're going to be thinking about that thing. Why is it there? Oh, it must be important. Oh, yeah, I need to remember that. It's like tying a string around your finger back in the day. You shall therefore keep this statute at its appointed time from year to year. It's a statute. This is an instruction. This is what you do. Later, it will be codified into the law. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, you don't just run past that, stop and think about what it means, and shall give it to you, you shall set apart to the Lord all that first opens the womb. Remember, what you're getting, what you're blessed to receive is what was promised to them way back when. Here in this latter day, we can say, oh, it's so hard. The world's so tough. You know what? I got the Word of God. I've got 2,000 books in my library on my computer alone. I've got the full account of what Jesus did in detail. I can study it. I can hold it in my hand. I've got it on my phone. I can listen to it. These people were still waiting for the promise. They were still waiting for it. It's important that we appreciate that we have the fullness of the message of salvation. They were still waiting. They were still waiting. So God did things for them to reassure them. You'll set apart to the Lord all the first that opens the womb. All the firstborn of your animals that are males shall be the Lord's, even the critters. They're the Lord's. Every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. And you have to understand, donkeys were valuable animals. Donkeys were amazing animals. They could work and work and work. They can walk over rocky ground. They can go a long time without eating really healthy stuff. They can eat weeds. You know, they're like goats, kind of. They're amazingly useful animals. And if you had one, you were kind of well off. It was like back in the day if you could afford a car, right? Every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. And when it is time to come, and when in time to come, your son asks you, what does this mean? You shall say to him, by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. For when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of animals. Therefore, that's why I sacrifice to the Lord all the males that first open the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. And it shall be as a mark on your hand and frontlets between your eyes, for by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt. There's an old saying, don't forget where you came from. We make a mistake in our modern culture of thinking of ourselves as individuals. I'm not. I am, but they would remember their ancestry. They would be able to say, I am Kurt, son of Kincaid, son of Joseph, son of Sam Solomon, son of on and on and on. I can't even get past that. I can't even get past it. But those people, and on my mother's side, John, Andrew, Thomas, my namesake and James' namesake, Andrew, our middle names, those people also made us who we are. We stand on their shoulders. Who were they? What were their lives? What were their struggles? We stand on their shoulders. We have learned from them. As I've gone through this with losing Jonathan, I thought about my mama, my grandmother, and my grandpa, Gramps, as I call him, who lost a child that was 2.5 years old to whooping cough. And I remember my mom telling that story, and I remember my grandpa telling me about it, what he went through. And then having, it took him like 8 years to pay off the doctor and the hospital. But we learn from them. It passes on to us. And we want to learn from them respectfully. Oftentimes we want to look at older people and think, well, they were dumb. And then the older you get, the more you realize that your parents were far more wise than you ever began to comprehend. And they're very wise if they learned from their parents. All right. Enough about that stuff. Now to pillars of cloud and fire. Sounds exciting. Okay. There is a bunch of stuff we can talk about here. When it comes to the Exodus, the actual event, the actual Exodus, why won't you let me? There it is. Okay. And knowing the journey, the way they went, there's a lot in play here. Okay. We will spend time talking about this. Bottom line, like so many things, I mean, we'll look into it and we'll delve into it. That'll be next time. But it doesn't matter which way they went. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if, they went over to Charlotte, taking I-16, or not Charlotte, Charleston. You take I-16 over and go up, or you can take 85 over and go across, or whatever the different ways are. Doesn't matter. What matters is what God did through that, whether it was up here or down here or down here. It does not matter. There's some ambiguity in the terms that lead us to think it could be this, could be that. We'll go through that. I'm not going to really go crazy deep into the woods on it, but we will talk about it. The key thing is, what did God do? God used a big body of water to wipe out the Egyptians. That's the important part. They passed through on dry land. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near, for God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So back to that picture. The easiest way to go would have been right up here. See, that's a road. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. That's a road. And that is the way when Israel came down to Egypt. That's the way they came. When Jacob came down, when Joseph was brought down, that's the way you would go. It's for my crew here, it's the Panamericana that runs along the coast. That's the way they would have gone, because out here, there's nothing. But God said, if I take them that way, we're going to get to the Philistines way too quick. And you know what? They're not ready for the Philistines. It's like a football team. You know what? You need to kick some puppies at the beginning of the season. Sorry, it sounds awful, but that's just football talk. You need to whip up on some teams that aren't that good so that you can get things figured out. You don't want to play your biggest, Alabama and Auburn don't play in the first game of the season. They play the last game of the season. Ohio State and Michigan don't play early in the season. They play at the end of the season. You got to get ready for those big contests. It is the same idea. He said, if I have them go up against the Philistines now, and all you got to do is think Philistines, when they were still around, because Israel didn't do what they were supposed to do, when they were still around in David's day, where was Goliath from? And his 5 brothers? Oh, yeah, they were Philistines. So if I have them go up against those guys right away, they're going to chicken out and return to Egypt. They chicken out eventually anyway. We'll deal with that in time. But he certainly didn't want it to happen then, because they would have turned around and go back. I had homework for you. Go out. You can find it on whatever source of music you use. The different platforms, whether it's Apple Music, blah, 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 whatever. And my kids know it, I know, but it's good to listen to again. Listen to Keith Green, easy enough name to remember. And the song is, there's an album, but the song is So You Want to Go Back to Egypt. It's one of the best contemporary Christian songs ever, because it just catches the essence of it and it helps you apply it to your life when the children of Israel whine and want to go back to Egypt. And it's really funny. I could play it now, but I'm not going to. Go out and listen to it. There, I gave you homework. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Okay, we're going to talk about this more later. The term Red Sea, remember, in Hebrew, here's some Hebrew. Okay, this is this verse. Let's see, are we on 17? Here, we'll get down to 18. Make sure it's on 18 here. This is the verse we're looking at in Hebrew. Okay, now it looks weird to everybody. I know. What you have to understand is, see these dots and the lines, those things, those are the vowels. Okay, some of them are above the line, some are below, some are in the middle. There's let's see, there's one in the middle. These are different things there in the middle. Anyway, when this was written, none of those dots were there. None of those vowels were there. They didn't use them. They just knew it. And so they didn't put them there. That came later. So the term Red Sea can mean, depending on, this is called pointing. Depending on how it's pointed, it can mean different things. So we have to embrace that and just work with it. And I don't care in today's terms. Okay, we're here. I don't care if God led them across Lake Lanier or the Atlantic Ocean or the Chattahoochee River. He does that later with the Jordan. I don't care what it is, or the Mississippi. It's still a mighty act of God. No matter where it is, it's a mighty act of God. And tying in with that, in the thing we talk about often of cosmological warfare. When I say that, I hear, when I go cosmological warfare, I see SpongeBob saying imagination. It's not imagination, but it is cosmological warfare. This is God duking it out with, smacking around the gods of Egypt, and he's not done yet, because they're going to come back for more. They're going to come back for more. Stupid as that is, they're going to come back for more, and that'll be it. That'll be it. But God led people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea, the Reed Sea. It could be the Sea of Reeds. And we'll get into that more. I'm just trying to whet your appetite. And the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt, equipped for battle. Now, what exactly does that mean? Don't know. They were ready. They were prepared as best they could be. You know, they didn't have chariots. They didn't have spears. They didn't have swords per se. They were peasants. They were slaves. But I think and I've got to look into it more. I wanted to beforehand, but I got busy doing some other things. Equipped for battle, they were on the move. They were on the march like an army. If you were marching out, you were moving like an army. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear 430 years before. Made them solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from you, with you from here. Why did they remember that? Because they did what I talked about. They didn't waste a moment watching Suits on Amazon Prime. They didn't waste a moment binging on Netflix. They didn't watch sports. They sat around and they talked in the evening around the fire, right? Around the fireplace. And you know what happened? Grandpa told them things. He repeated things. And they learned it. That's how they learned the stories of God's working of salvation. Even when they have the Bible, the Old Testament, they didn't own it individually. They went to the synagogue and they heard it, and it was the father's responsibility to teach it to his children as they walked on the way and when they sat down to eat dinner and when they would lie down at night. He would tell them about Elijah and the showdown with the 450 prophets of Baal. He would tell them, Dad, tell us about the crossing of the Red Sea again. And they'd imagine sticking their hand into the water on the side and grabbing a fish as they went through. As you kids grew up, my kids grew up with the picture in the children's Bible that we had. That's what they did. That's what they did. Just like I sang songs to you when you went to bed, right? They told stories. They told stories, and they were true stories. That's why they knew they were supposed to take Joseph's bones. They knew where Joseph's bones were, and Moses wasn't going to leave them behind. And they moved on from Succoth and encamped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. Out there in the Egyptian mind, when you left Egypt, you went into chaos. You went into chaos. The wilderness is chaos. There's no structure. There's no infrastructure. There aren't wells for water. There's aren't places to sleep, any of that. Okay. But they're out there at the edge of the wilderness. And no matter which one of these ways they went, see, they're up here. They were in Ramses. Here is Goshen, right? Once you got out here, it's like crossing over into Alabama. You're going into Bumbledum nowhere. That's the idea. That's where the wilderness was. And their idea of wilderness is different than yours and mine. You and I think of wilderness and we think, oh, let's go to Toccoa Falls. Oh, let's go hike a little ways on the Appalachian Trail. The wilderness was scary. It was not a good place to go. And the Lord went before them. That's probably the last thing we'll get to talk about today. And that's good because that's the end of the chapter. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. And that goes on for a long time. Okay. This is talked about later in Exodus 14:19. And there it says, then the angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. Now, I got this big long slug from David Heiser over here. That's a Wisconsin Lutheran Seminary term for a great big quote. They call it slugs. They used to make us translate stuff from Latin from these different theologians, and it was called translating the slugs. What I just read, then the angel of God who was before the host of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood before them. So that's talking about two things: the pillar of cloud at night, fire, and the angel of the Lord. And in 21, back to 13:21, it says, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. So in the Old Testament, and this is what the Jews always believed, was that they called it the two powers in heaven. The two powers in heaven. There was the Lord, God, and there was the angel of the Lord. Yahweh would appear as an angel, and the angel of the Lord. And they taught that, they believed it, they understood it. You can go back in the ancient Jewish writings, and it's all over the place. You know when they did away with that and then finally declared it to be heretical and not to be mentioned again? Guess when? Just guess. Right after that Jesus guy came.
57 BC?
Yep. No, it was after, and the exact date, I don't know, but it was somewhere around 80 to 100 AD. That they said, nope, no more. That's awful. That's a terrible idea. Because when Jesus came, he used their terminology for saying, I'm it. I'm the second one. And they understood both of them were God. They understood that. They believed it. They taught it. So when you read Jesus' interaction with the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and you understand he was using their terminology for the two powers of God, that's why they flipped out. And they couldn't say there wasn't one, because that's what they taught. Later, they fixed it. They kind of did a Joe Stalin. You know what Joe Stalin did? It's what tyrants always do. Joe Stalin is the one who is most known for it. Stalin came along and he did away with Lenin. And then about every 10 years, he would do a purge, which meant this. He would kill everybody who knew him, including his own kids, everybody but his daughter. He would kill everybody who knew him and then rewrite history. And then he'd move forward some more, another period of time, and then he'd get rid of all those people in his inner circle and rewrite history again. And each time he became more mighty and awesome and wonderful. Okay? This is kind of a Joe Stalin when they did away with the two powers doctrine. They said, nope, no more. We're just going to have one God, and that's it, and everything else is heretical. But here, if you look at what these two passages say, Exodus 13:21, where we are, and Exodus 14:19, it's very clear saying there was the pillar of cloud and fire, and there was the angel. They could see the angel. Interesting. I had always, for most of my life, as a theologian and pastor, I had always thought that it was just kind of using two terms for the same thing, but that's not what it says. It's not what it says. The Lord went before them by day in the pillar of cloud to lead them along the way. And in Exodus 14:19, then the angel of God who was going before the host of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt. And before 80 whatever AD, and it sounds like Derek's got the date better than I do, 80 something AD, all the commentators, the rabbis, this is the kind of stuff they said. Yeah, see, they're both there. They're both there. It's both of them. Interesting. this stuff of digging in and being willing to find things that you didn't know, find things about which I was ignorant. It's a good, healthy thing. And Michael Heiser calls his podcast that he does every week, he calls it the Naked Bible Podcast, which he's saying, don't cover up the stuff that's difficult. You just deal with what's there. Let the text speak. Don't try to say, well, we don't want to deal with that because it really raises some issues. And I don't like to, and there is a predisposition of pastors. You know what a pastor, you come out of seminary as a pastor, and you know what you are conditioned to believe. And part of it's your own thinking, but you think you're supposed to know everything. I've got to have the answers. Hey, if Brandon asks me a question, I better have the answer. I better know. I better know what truth is. And if Derek has a question, if Deb has a question, whoever, if they got a question for me, I've got to have the answer. The idea, when I was 28 years old, the idea of saying, I don't know, terrified me. It terrified me. It's okay to not know. It's okay to say, hey, I'm going to dig into that. Hey, let's look at that together. That's interesting. That's okay. That's okay. It's a good thing. So we'll dig into the difficult things. We're going to do that when we start to talk about the crossing of the Red Sea, as we try to figure out where it was, if we can know with any degree of certainty where that crossing was, and even more, whether we can know or not, whether we can put our finger on that map and say, oh, it was here, or it was here, or it was there. Whether we can do that or not doesn't matter. Because if we focus just on that, as though the whole point is figuring out their itinerary, because we want to know if they stopped at the Quick Trip on exit 42 or not, well, that's pointless. What was it God was doing wherever it was? What is it God was doing? What was it he was accomplishing? And most important of all, what role did it play? What part did it play in the cosmological warfare between God and the gods of Egypt, who he promised to crush, who he said he was going to crush? And then, and also, and this is key to that, understanding the way the Egyptians would have looked at what took place. We've talked about that some. We've talked about with the different plagues. Well, the Egyptians knew who the goddess Nut was and what that meant. You know, they knew she was in charge of frogs and the significance it played. They knew who God was taking on. Well, are there things from their perspective, from their theological worldview? And understand this. You know what the big difference between the children of Israel and us is? And it's the same difference that's between us and the children and the people of Egypt. You think, we think, theology, world, like they're two different things. Here's theology, here's the world. We're thinking over here. It's like right side and left side of the brain, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, that stuff. And there is validity to that stuff. But we think we're in this ball or we're in this ball. We'll call them spheres. We're in this sphere or this sphere. We think of them as two separate and distinct things. They had one. They had one. They knew if they lived today, they would have understood full well that it is the dark ones, the fallen ones, the lords of hell who govern this world. They just happen to do it through bozos like Joe Biden and guys like Donald Trump. That's who rules the world. They do. They do. And they would tell us, if you think that those guys make any decisions on their own, then you're a clown. You just don't get it. Because they don't get to operate as independent operators. No way. No way. They represent someone. either knowingly or unknowingly. They may not know where the hierarchy ends, but they know that they are not their own. The Egyptians knew that about Pharaoh. He wasn't his own. He wasn't his own. He worked for them. He was the physical manifestation of Horus. And if he didn't do a good job, then we knew that Horus had left him because he wasn't up to the drill. And so we can him and bring somebody else in. Just like they'd march in that bull, Apis, and then kill it and bring in another one. There was a big ceremony with it, but that's the way they looked at the world. So with the crossing of the Red Sea, how did the Egyptians view that? And there's a whole lot of stuff there. It'll get really interesting. We're going to stop because, unfortunately, two things happen. One, time marches on. We got other stuff we've all got to do. And number two, my throat gets tired.
That concludes our broadcast for today. We publish our videos on YouTube, BitChute, and Brighteon. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give us a like or a thumbs up. We invite you to subscribe so you can continue to receive our content. Also, please consider sharing this video with others. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment below. This is Matthias 76, and together we will continue to decode the deception.